The American fighter that made Nazi engineers realize they'd already lost the war. The fuel gauge reads empty. Second Lieutenant William Roach is flying a 10,000-pound machine at 200 miles per hour over occupied France, and his engine is beginning to cough. That stuttering sound, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 missing beats, is the sound of every pilot's nightmare. He can see England ahead, tantalizingly close, impossibly far. Below him, a patchwork of French fields, some friendly, most crawling with German soldiers who would love nothing more than to capture an American pilot and his aircraft. His hands are sweating inside his gloves. The stick feels heavier. The Thunderbolt, his Thunderbolt, the one he's nicknamed Beetle, is gliding now, a 7-ton glider looking for a place to die. Then he sees it, an airfield, grass runway. Looks just like the Allied bases he knows. Ground vehicles moving in orderly patterns. He commits to the approach. Gear down, flaps down. The massive Republic P-47D touches down smoothly, rolls to a stop. Roach follows a ground vehicle to parking, shuts down the engine, takes off his helmet. Only then does he see them. The Bockenkreuz, the black crosses on nearby aircraft. German rifles pointing at his cockpit. His war as a combat pilot just ended. But something else is beginning. Something the Germans don't yet understand. Something that will keep their best engineers awake at night for the next 18 months. Because Lieutenant Roach didn't just hand them an airplane. He handed them a mirror. And when the Luftwaffe's finest minds looked into that mirror, they saw their own defeat staring back with 8 50 caliber machine guns and a turbo-supercharger system they couldn't replicate if they had a decade. This is November 7th, 1943. This is the story of what happened when Nazi Germany captured American technology and realized, with mounting horror, that they weren't just losing the war. They'd already lost it. They just didn't know it yet. And if you think this is a story about one airplane, you're wrong. This is a story about two entirely different ways of fighting a modern war. Two philosophies, two industrial systems. One of them built on scarcity, elegance, and engineering genius. The other built on something the Germans had never encountered before, effectively unlimited resources applied with ruthless efficiency. By the time German test pilot Hans-Werner Lerche finished flying the captured Thunderbolt, he would write something in his logbook that would haunt Luftwaffe headquarters, something that would eventually make its way to reports sitting on desks in Berlin, something that nobody wanted to hear, but everyone needed to understand. The Americans weren't just building better planes. They were playing a different game entirely. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind to the moment the engine stops. The moment Lieutenant Roach's wheels touch German-occupied soil. The moment the education of the Third Reich begins. Because what the Germans discovered when they pried open the cowling of that American fighter would fundamentally alter their understanding of what they were really fighting against. The answer wasn't pilots. It wasn't tactics. It wasn't even technology in the narrow sense. It was something far more terrifying. November 7th, 1943. Carpic Airfield, northern France. The Thunderbolt sits on German soil now, surrounded by Luftwaffe personnel who are staring at it like archaeologists who just unearthed something from an alien civilization. The Republic P-47D is massive, obscenely massive for a single-seat fighter. It weighs nearly 14,000 pounds fully loaded. For comparison, Germany's Focke-Wulf FW-190, one of their finest fighters, weighs about 11,000 pounds at maximum load. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 is even lighter. The American fighter looks bloated, ungainly, like someone designed a fighter plane, then decided to add another fighter plane to it just because they could. The German ground crew walks around it slowly, touching the aluminum skin, peering into the gun ports, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. 8 heavy machine guns, each one capable of firing 800 rounds per minute. Combined rate of fire, nearly 100 rounds per second. Most German fighters carry 4 machine guns and 2 cannons. Some early models have 6 guns total. The Americans looked at that and said, not enough, and doubled it. One of the German officers runs his hand along the armor plating behind the cockpit. It's thick, really thick. He estimates 200 pounds of armor protecting the pilot. 200 pounds. That's the weight of 2 more machine guns with ammunition. The Americans could have made this thing faster, more agile, more elegant. Instead, they chose to keep their pilots alive. This is the first clue, but nobody recognizes it yet. Within hours, armed guards surround the aircraft. The Luftwaffe immediately recognizes the intelligence value. American markings are hastily painted over with German Bockenkreuz on wings and fuselage. Bright yellow paint, RLM Gelb 04, is slapped on undersurfaces and tail. This yellow paint is standard procedure for captured aircraft. It prevents German anti-aircraft gunners from shooting down their own prize. Arrangements are made to transfer the aircraft to Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's premier testing facility, located about 60 miles northwest of Berlin. The aircraft receives the designation T9 plus FK, the coding used by the Zirkus Rosarius evaluation unit. Hans-Werner Lerche gets the call. If you're going to have anyone fly a captured enemy fighter, Lerche is your man. He's the principal test pilot at Erprobungsstelle Rechlin. Over the course of the war, he will fly 125 different aircraft types without ever crashing or seriously damaging a single one. Not once. His record is spotless in an era when test pilots die with disturbing regularity. Lerche approaches the P-47 with professional curiosity tempered by appropriate caution. He climbs into the cockpit and immediately understands why American pilots need extensive training. The instrument panel looks like the control room of a power plant. Twice as many gauges as any German fighter. Strange levers controlling systems he's never seen. A turbo-supercharger that requires understanding exhaust flow management. A technology that's theoretical in German aviation circles, but apparently standard practice in American designs. The constant speed propeller operates differently from German equivalents. Most confusing is the elaborate system of automatic engine management. German pilots handle this manually through constant throttle and mixture adjustments. The Americans automated it. Lerche later writes in his memoirs, "The P-47 cockpit could baffle even an experienced pilot. I gradually managed to ascertain the function of most of the levers and instruments, but there were also some obscure controls, the meaning of which was not immediately clear to me." He spends considerable time on the ground, experimenting with controls, studying the layout, trying to reverse engineer the operating procedures without a manual. The engine start sequence alone reveals sophistication beyond standard German practice. When the 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp roars to life, it produces a sound utterly different from German inline engines. This is a deep, powerful rumble. The sound of enormous displacement and tremendous power reserves held in check. Lerche taxes carefully. He can feel the weight through the controls. Nearly 14,000 pounds. The FW-190A 8 weighs about 11,000 pounds fully loaded. The Thunderbolt is genuinely massive for a single-seat fighter, larger than some twin-engine aircraft in Luftwaffe service. He advances the throttle for takeoff. The R2800 develops 2,000 horsepower at standard boost settings. With water methanol injection, it reaches 2,300 horsepower. Germany's BMW 801D, the finest radial engine in German production, produces between 1,700 and 1,730 horsepower at maximum continuous power. The Americans have a 500 horsepower advantage, just casually, just as standard equipment. Even with this power advantage, the P-47's greater weight means the takeoff run is longer than Lerche expected. He uses nearly the entire grass field. But once airborne, something begins to change. Below 15,000 feet, the P-47 feels exactly as German combat pilots had described in their reports. Heavy, sluggish in turns, unable to match German fighters in maneuverability. The rate of climb is mediocre at best. At this altitude, any competent German pilot in a contemporary fighter could outmaneuver the Thunderbolt. Lerche climbs steadily. 16,000 feet, 18,000, 20,000, and somewhere above 20,000 feet, the character of the aircraft transforms completely. The turbo-supercharger, driven by exhaust gases, becoming increasingly efficient as air pressure decreases, begins forcing massive quantities of compressed air into the engine cylinders. While German engines gas for oxygen and lose power, the R-2800 maintains full rated output. At 25,000 feet, where German fighters operate at perhaps 70% of their sea-level power, the Thunderbolt's engine is still producing full rated output. Lerche pushes the throttle forward at 25,000 feet. The Thunderbolt accelerates with surprising vigor. He rolls into a dive to test high-speed characteristics, and the aircraft responds with enthusiasm that borders on violence. The P-47 accelerates past 500 miles per hour in a steep dive. The controls stiffen dramatically as airflow compresses around the airframe. At this speed, recovery requires both hands on the control stick and considerable physical strength. But the aircraft handles it. The Americans built the airframe strong enough to withstand speeds that would tear German fighters apart. The roll rate impresses Lerche immediately. Despite its size and weight, the Thunderbolt can roll faster than any German fighter he's flown, including the FW-190, which is considered excellent in roll performance. This characteristic, combined with devastating dive speed, creates a tactical advantage that German pilots have been reporting without fully understanding. An American pilot in trouble at high altitude can simply roll inverted and dive away at speeds no German fighter can match. Any Luftwaffe pilot attempting pursuit encounters compressibility effects that the P-47's stronger airframe handles more successfully. Lerche flies the captured Thunderbolt through a comprehensive test program. His preliminary report contains observations that trouble Luftwaffe headquarters staff, who still believe German fighter designs are fundamentally superior. At altitudes above 25,000 feet, where aerial combat is increasingly occurring as Allied bomber formations fly higher, the P-47 Thunderbolt is not inferior to German fighters. It's superior in specific, crucial ways that negate German advantages in maneuverability and rate of climb. Over the following weeks, Rechlin's engineers subject Beetle to exhaustive testing. They photograph every component from multiple angles. They measure every dimension with precision instruments. They weigh every major part. They test every system under various conditions. The turbo-supercharger system receives special attention. This technology represents the primary difference between American and German approaches to high-altitude performance. What they discover shocks engineers accustomed to resource-constrained design philosophy. The Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double WASP consists of 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows of 9 cylinders each. Total displacement, 2,804.5 cubic inches, equivalent to 45.9 liters. Germany's BMW 801D displaces 2,560 cubic inches. The Americans have a displacement advantage, but that alone doesn't explain the significant power difference. The R-2800 incorporates forged aluminum alloy pistons, sodium-cooled exhaust valves to handle extreme temperatures, a crankshaft forged from high-grade steel alloy that German metallurgists examine with professional envy. They recognize materials they can no longer obtain in sufficient quantities. The quality of American materials and manufacturing precision astounds the German inspection team. Every component shows evidence of precision manufacturing to tight tolerances. Surface finishes are consistently smooth across all parts. The magnetos use materials that are increasingly scarce in Germany. The spark plugs incorporate high-grade ceramics superior to German equivalents. Most tellingly, the entire engine shows no signs of material substitution or quality compromises forced by resource limitations. The Americans built this engine exactly as originally designed, using all specified materials, without the desperate improvisations that increasingly characterize late-war German production. The turbo-supercharger system reveals engineering sophistication that Germany attempted to develop, but never successfully implemented in production aircraft. Exhaust gases from all 18 cylinders are collected through manifolds and routed through insulated pipes to a turbine unit located behind and below the cockpit. This turbine, spinning at tremendous speed driven by hot exhaust gases, drives a centrifugal compressor that forces additional air into the engine's supercharger. The system includes an intercooler to reduce the temperature of compressed air, increasing its density and preventing destructive detonation. Automatic regulators control boost pressure and turbine speed without requiring constant pilot intervention. German engineers understand the theoretical principles perfectly. They've conducted experimental programs exploring similar approaches. But implementing such a system in mass-produced combat aircraft has proven impossible given material shortages and manufacturing limitations. The turbo-supercharger requires exotic high-temperature alloys for turbine blades that must withstand extreme temperatures while spinning at high speeds. The control system demands precision manufacturing and reliable components. The extensive ducting needs heat-resistant materials and perfect seals. Every element has to work reliably in combat conditions. Exposed to vibration. Temperature extremes ranging from minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit at altitude to over 200 degrees near the engine. Potential battle damage. The Americans solved all these problems and installed the complete system as standard equipment on every P-47 produced. Standard equipment. Not experimental. Not limited production. Not reserved for elite units. Just how the airplane works. Installed in thousands of examples. This casual implementation of advanced technology reveals an industrial capacity that German engineers find difficult to fully comprehend. One German engineer writes in his report, "The turbo-supercharger system alone represents a level of engineering sophistication and manufacturing capability that exceeds current German capacity to replicate in production quantities." The armament installation provides another lesson in American abundance. The P-47D mounts 8 Browning M2 machine guns of .50 caliber, 4 guns in each wing. Most German fighters carry mixed armament, typically 4 machine guns and 2 20mm cannons, or 6 machine guns total. The American decision to install 8 heavy machine guns represents a deliberate choice to maximize firepower even at the cost of additional weight and complexity. Each machine gun feeds from a separate ammunition box built into the wing structure. Each box contains 425 rounds. Total ammunition capacity, 3,400 rounds across all 8 guns. The FW-190 typically carries approximately 2,000 rounds total for its machine guns and 500 rounds for its cannons. The P-47 pilot can fire all 8 guns continuously for approximately 20 seconds before exhausting ammunition. Combined rate of fire, nearly 100 rounds per second. When all 8 guns are properly harmonized to converge at a single point in space, the volume of fire is simply overwhelming. German test firings document the devastating effect, but it's the installation quality that impresses German armament specialists. Each gun is mounted in an electrically heated bay to prevent freezing at high altitude, where temperatures drop to minus 60 Fahrenheit or lower. Spent cartridge cases and disintegrating belt links are collected through chutes and ejected through ports in the wing's lower surface. The system functions flawlessly during Rechlin testing. No jamming, no feeding malfunctions. Ammunition quality also reveals another dimension of American industrial capability. The .50 caliber rounds use armor-piercing cores manufactured to consistent specifications. Incendiary compounds that function reliably. Tracer elements that burn predictably. Testing reveals that American ammunition is consistently more reliable than equivalent German production, which has suffered quality degradation as strategic materials become scarce. The Thunderbolt's armor protection demonstrates American willingness to accept significant weight penalties in exchange for pilot survivability. The cockpit is surrounded by heavy armor plate on multiple sides. The pilot sits in what American designers call an armored bathtub, protection from below and behind. The windscreen incorporates thick bulletproof glass capable of stopping machine gun rounds and resisting cannon shell fragments. Additional armor plates protect critical systems, including oil coolers and the vulnerable turbo-supercharger. Total armor weight exceeds 200 pounds. German fighters typically carry less comprehensive armor protection, prioritizing lighter weight and better performance, while accepting higher pilot casualties as an unavoidable cost of combat operations. The design philosophy difference reveals itself in maintenance accessibility. American designers clearly anticipated that mechanics working in forward air bases would need to service aircraft quickly, possibly at night, possibly under adverse weather conditions, possibly while under threat of enemy attack. Every major component can be accessed through large panels secured with quick-release fasteners requiring only simple tools. The massive engine can be changed in the field within a few hours using standard hoisting equipment. German fighters, designed with the expectation of factory-level maintenance for major repairs, typically require more extensive disassembly. This difference reflects American abundance versus German scarcity. The Americans can't afford to dedicate engineering resources to maintainability because their industrial capacity allows them to optimize designs for operational efficiency rather than pure production efficiency. The radio installation represents another area where American technology exceeds German equivalents. The aircraft carries an SCR-274 in-command radio for air-to-air and air-to-ground communication, plus an SCR-515A liaison radio providing additional channels. Both units operate with clarity and range that exceed contemporary German radio capabilities. German radio systems suffer from persistent interference problems that American engineers apparently solve through superior component design and better shielding. The radios also integrate with an identification friend or foe system that automatically identifies friendly aircraft to ground controllers, preventing friendly fire incidents. This level of automated identification represents sophistication that German forces lack in 1943. Perhaps the most profound revelation for German engineers comes not from any single advanced system, but from the cumulative impression of quality and completeness throughout the aircraft. Every component appears to be the best possible version of that component that American engineers could design and manufacturers could produce. Nothing is obviously compromised due to material shortages. Nothing shows clear evidence of substitute materials being used because preferred materials were unavailable. Nothing reflects the desperate improvisations that increasingly characterize German late-war production. German technical reports compiled at Rechlin emphasize this point repeatedly. The P-47 Thunderbolt has been built exactly as the designers intended, using all specified materials and processes, with no apparent compromises forced by resource scarcity. This level of manufacturing fidelity to original design specifications is becoming increasingly difficult for German industry to achieve as the war progresses. The flight testing program continues through winter 1943 and into early 1944. Additional P-47s are captured and brought to Rechlin for comparative evaluation. On May 29, 1944, another P-47 lands in German hands, when Second Lieutenant Lloyd Hathcock becomes disoriented during a ferry flight and mistakenly lands at enemy-held Rome Littorio airfield in Italy. His aircraft is quickly seized by German forces, transferred to Rechlin, and designated T9 plus LK. The testing data accumulated at Rechlin produces tactical recommendations distributed to frontline Luftwaffe fighter units. Engage P-47s below 15,000 feet, where the Thunderbolt's poor low-altitude performance gives German fighters clear advantages. Avoid diving away from attacking Thunderbolts. The American fighter will simply accelerate to speeds German aircraft cannot match. Damaged P-47s frequently continue flying despite battle damage that would destroy German fighters, so attacks need to be pressed home aggressively. But the tactical advice, however useful to individual pilots, cannot address the fundamental strategic problem becoming increasingly apparent. Germany is fighting an opponent with effectively unlimited material resources relative to German industrial capacity. Every damaged or destroyed P-47 is replaced within days from production exceeding 300 aircraft per month at peak output. American pilot training programs produce skilled aviators in quantities Germany can no longer match. The The logistics system supporting American Thunderbolt operations delivers fuel, ammunition, and spare parts without apparent constraint. Meanwhile, German logistics deteriorate under relentless Allied air attack. The captured P-47s are eventually transferred to the Wanderzirkus Rosarius, the special Luftwaffe demonstration unit commanded by Flugkapitän Theodor Rosarius. This specialized unit travels to frontline fighter bases throughout occupied Europe, allowing German pilots to see captured Allied aircraft firsthand. The demonstrations serve dual purposes: educational and psychological. Pilots learn visual recognition features and tactical characteristics of enemy aircraft they'll face in combat. But they also see physical evidence that Allied equipment is often superior to their own in specific important capabilities, particularly at high altitudes where combat increasingly occurs. Post-war interviews with Luftwaffe pilots who attended these demonstrations reveal the psychological impact. While the Zirkus Rosarius pilots can show that German fighters maintain advantages in certain flight regimes, the demonstrations make clear that at the altitudes where American bomber formations operate, escorted by P-47s and later P-51s, German fighters are at a distinct disadvantage. The intelligence gathered from captured P-47s includes detailed performance data that directly contradicts optimistic assumptions circulating in Luftwaffe briefings. At sea level, the P-47D achieves maximum speed of approximately 350 miles per hour. Not particularly impressive compared to the FW-190A's 408 miles per hour at the same altitude. At 10,000 feet, the Thunderbolt reaches approximately 375 miles per hour. But at 30,000 feet, the P-47 achieves 426 miles per hour, while the Focke-Wulf struggles to reach 370 miles per hour, and the Bf-109G manages approximately 385 miles per hour. The performance advantage at combat altitudes is clear, decisive, and growing more important as Allied bomber formations fly higher. The service ceiling comparison proves equally discouraging. The P-47 Thunderbolt service ceiling reaches 42,000 feet. German fighters rarely operate effectively above 35,000 feet. Their performance degrades rapidly at higher altitudes due to reduced engine power in thin air. American bomber formations can and do operate at altitudes where German interceptors can barely reach them, and where the interceptors that do reach combat altitude have insufficient power reserves for effective combat maneuvering. The P-47 escorts operate comfortably at these altitudes, maintaining full combat capability while German fighters struggle. Range comparisons reveal another dimension of American superiority. With external fuel tanks, the P-47D can escort bombers on missions penetrating deep into Germany. By 1944, Thunderbolts equipped with 108-gallon drop tanks routinely fly missions covering 1,000 miles or more. German fighters, designed primarily for short-range interception missions, lack the internal fuel capacity for extended operations. The difference means American fighters can engage at times and places of their choosing, while German fighters are forced to fight defensively. The captured Thunderbolts also provide insights into American pilot training and tactical doctrine through examination of gun camera footage and analysis of combat damage patterns. The evidence suggests American pilots consistently employ tactics emphasizing the P-47's strengths while avoiding situations exposing its weaknesses. They maintain high altitude where the turbo-supercharger provides clear advantage. They use dive-and-zoom attacks rather than sustained turning dogfights. They work in coordinated pairs or four-ship flights, maintaining mutual support. The discipline evident in American tactical execution impresses Luftwaffe analysts. Many Luftwaffe pilots, particularly experienced aces, prefer to fight individually, relying on personal skill and aggressive tactics. American pilots follow established doctrine consistently, supporting each other systematically, rarely allowing individual pride to override tactical sense. This disciplined approach, combined with superior high-altitude equipment and growing numerical advantage, creates a combination even veteran German pilots find increasingly difficult to overcome. By D-Day in June 1944, the strategic situation has deteriorated to the point where intelligence on captured aircraft provides little practical value. The Luftwaffe understands clearly that American equipment is superior in important ways. They comprehend American tactics. They have detailed technical data. But this knowledge cannot produce the resources, strategic materials, manufacturing capacity, and trained personnel needed to effectively compete. The comparison between American and German engine production illustrates the impossible position Germany faces. Pratt & Whitney, along with Lycoming and Ford Motor Company, produce over 125,000 R-2800 engines by war's end. Production of this single engine type exceeds Germany's entire combat aircraft engine production. BMW produces approximately 61,000 examples of the 801 radial engine throughout the entire war. The Daimler-Benz DB605, Germany's most produced inline engine, reaches approximately 42,400 units total production. American production of one advanced engine type surpasses Germany's total output of all combat aircraft engines combined. American industry in 1944 produces approximately 96,000 aircraft, while Germany reaches approximately 25,000 aircraft of all types. The United States produces 38,000 fighters alone, plus 16,000 heavy bombers, plus thousands of medium bombers, transports, and trainers. When combined with British and Soviet production, the Allied advantage in aircraft production exceeds 5:1 by 1944. The industrial base supporting this production operates on a scale Germany cannot match. The Aluminum Company of America alone produces more aluminum than Germany's entire aluminum industry. Individual American steel plants frequently outproduce the entire Ruhr industrial region. The automotive factories that manufacture aircraft engines operate on moving assembly lines, where German plants use batch production methods. Even the machine tools that build the machines that build the aircraft are themselves produced in quantities that allow American industry to supply not only its own requirements, but also substantial quantities to British and Soviet allies. The captured P-47s ultimately end their service in the chaotic final months of the European War. The aircraft, designated T-9 plus FK, originally William Roach's Beetle, is recovered by American forces at Göttingen in May 1945, found among a collection of captured Allied aircraft the Germans had been evaluating. Photographs taken by American forces show the aircraft still wearing partial German markings, parked alongside FW-190s and Bf-109s. A museum of captured equipment documenting the breadth of the Luftwaffe's intelligence-gathering effort. The Thunderbolts that served with German evaluation units provided German pilots and engineers with an education they desperately needed but received too late to matter strategically. The aircraft demonstrated that American industrial philosophy prioritized absolute capability over elegant efficiency, abundant resources over careful optimization, systematic material advantage over individual technical excellence. These priorities, when implemented with nearly unlimited resources and manufacturing capacity, produced weapons systems that outclassed German equivalents in aggregate, even when German design showed superior characteristics in specific isolated parameters. The lesson extended far beyond the P-47 itself. Every category of captured American equipment told the same fundamental story. The B-17 Flying Fortress bomber with its quartet of turbo-supercharged Wright Cyclone engines represented strategic bombing capability Germany never achieved. The P-51 Mustang, combining American airframe engineering with the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, created what many historians consider the finest piston engine fighter of the entire war. Each aircraft type revealed the same fundamental American approach: solve problems through superior engineering supported by unlimited industrial capacity rather than through clever optimization constrained by resource scarcity. Luftwaffe analysts clearly observed they were not being defeated by superior tactics or better trained pilots. They were being defeated by an industrial system that could design adequate equipment and then produce it in quantities that rendered German qualitative advantages increasingly irrelevant. The Americans designed to their industrial strengths, leveraging massive manufacturing capacity, abundant raw materials, efficient logistics. Germany by 1943 was designing despite crippling industrial limitations, attempting to achieve through engineering cleverness what they could no longer accomplish through industrial might. The strategic implications were documented throughout the Luftwaffe's technical services. Germany had entered the war with arguably the world's most advanced air force. German pilots were better trained than most opponents initially. German tactics were more refined. But German industry fundamentally lacked the capacity to sustain these advantages when facing opponents with vastly greater industrial resources. American aircraft production doubled repeatedly. In 1940, again in 1941, again in 1942, and continued expanding until by 1944 American factories were producing over 96,000 aircraft annually. Germany never exceeded 40,000 aircraft in any year despite desperate efforts to increase production. The quality gap between American and German aircraft widened steadily rather than narrowing. In 1942, German aircraft were often superior. By 1944, American aircraft equaled or exceeded German designs in virtually every important category. By 1945, the gap had become a chasm. The psychological impact on Luftwaffe morale of facing endless streams of capable enemy aircraft proved as destructive as the material losses. German pilots reported feeling less like warriors in honorable combat and more like targets in a systematic destruction campaign. No matter how many Allied aircraft they shot down, more appeared the next day. No matter how skillfully they fought, American numerical superiority eventually prevailed through sheer attrition. The knowledge that their opponent's equipment was often superior, delivered in far greater quantities, supported by better logistics, and flown by adequately trained pilots who were quickly replaced when lost. This created a pervasive sense of inevitable defeat that spread throughout the fighter forces during 1944. The captured P-47s served as tangible physical evidence of this reality. Not propaganda claims or exaggerated intelligence reports. Actual aircraft that German pilots could examine directly. The Thunderbolt was not some miracle weapon or revolutionary technological breakthrough. It was simply a very good fighter aircraft, properly designed for its mission, adequately powered, well-armed, appropriately protected, and manufactured in quantities sufficient to overwhelm opposition through systematic application of material superiority. The final historical irony: the Germans learned these lessons thoroughly, documented them professionally, and grasped the implications completely, yet could never apply the knowledge they gained. Understanding American industrial superiority did not grant Germany the aluminum, steel, fuel, skilled labor, undamaged factories, and functioning transportation networks needed to produce equivalent aircraft in equivalent quantities. Knowing the P-47's exact capabilities did not provide the high-temperature alloys, precision manufacturing equipment, quality control systems, and trained workforce needed to build comparable turbo-supercharger systems. Intelligence gathered from captured aircraft documented the dimensions of German defeat with professional thoroughness, without offering any realistic path to avoid that defeat. When Allied forces captured Rechlin in May 1945, they found extensive documentation of the captured aircraft evaluation program. German technical reports filled filing cabinets detailing every measurable characteristic of every American and British aircraft examined during the war. The reports were models of technical thoroughness and scientific objectivity. They also represented thousands of man-hours spent meticulously documenting capabilities that Germany could observe and measure, but never replicate. American technical intelligence teams who reviewed the German reports after the war noted with professional interest that German engineers had understood American aircraft capabilities more clearly than American commanders sometimes did. The Germans had identified weaknesses in American designs that American pilots, learned to work around through experience. German engineering competence had never been in question. But the American reviewers also noted what the German reports implicitly revealed about Germany's strategic situation. Germany had attempted to fight a modern industrial war with an industrial base insufficient for the task. They'd compensated through excellent engineering, superior pilot training in early war years, and tactical innovation born of necessity. These advantages had sustained them through early victories against opponents with similar resource constraints. But against an opponent like the United States, possessing industrial capacity that exceeded all other major powers combined, excellent engineering and tactical skill could only delay the inevitable outcome rather than change it. The story of German engineers examining captured P-47 Thunderbolts provides a clear case study in the realities of industrial warfare as it evolved by the Second World War. The Thunderbolt succeeded not because it was the absolute best possible fighter aircraft by every conceivable measure, but because it was a very effective fighter aircraft produced in quantities that made isolated examples of technical superiority strategically irrelevant. American industry built 15,683 Thunderbolts while simultaneously building 15,486 P-51 Mustangs, 10,037 P-38 Lightnings, 13,738 F-6F Hellcats, and 12,571 F-4U Corsairs. Total American fighter production exceeded 70,000 aircraft during the war. Each aircraft represented thousands of hours of skilled labor, tons of aluminum and steel, hundreds of precision components, and manufacturing capacity that Germany could not approach. The P-47 Thunderbolt became a symbol of American industrial dominance to German pilots who fought against it. Luftwaffe pilots used the same nickname American pilots coined, calling it the Jug in acknowledgement of its ungainly appearance. As losses mounted and the strategic situation deteriorated, some referred to it simply as that 8-gun fighter, and learned through bitter experience to avoid engaging Thunderbolts at altitudes where the American fighter held tactical advantage, which increasingly meant avoiding combat above 20,000 feet. By war's end, P-47 Thunderbolts had destroyed approximately 3,752 enemy aircraft in aerial combat, while approximately 3,499 P-47s were lost to all causes. This roughly 1:1 exchange rate appears unremarkable until you consider that Thunderbolts served primarily in the ground attack role from mid-1944 onward, facing intense anti-aircraft fire during low-level missions. In the pure fighter escort role during 1943 and early 1944, P-47s achieved significantly better exchange rates, particularly at high altitudes where the turbo-supercharger advantage was most pronounced. The ground attack role revealed yet another dimension of American design philosophy, emphasizing versatility. When P-51 Mustangs with superior range began taking over bomber escort duties, the 9th Air Force reassigned many Thunderbolt groups to tactical air support missions. The rugged P-47, with its reliable air-cooled radial engine and heavy armor protection, proved exceptionally well-suited for dangerous low-altitude attack missions. The same characteristics that made it seem ponderous in low-altitude dogfights made it nearly ideal for ground attack, where survivability and firepower mattered more than maneuverability. Thunderbolt pilots flying ground attack missions destroyed staggering quantities of German military equipment. Official claims documented through gun camera footage included over 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles, and 68,000 trucks destroyed or damaged. German ground forces learned to recognize and fear the characteristic sound of Pratt & Whitney R-2800 radial engines at low altitude. That deep rumble provided warning of impending attacks German troops were largely helpless to prevent. The question of what happened to the specific captured aircraft provides an epilogue. William Roach's P-47D Beetle, serial number 42 to 22,490, designated T9 plus FK by the Germans, survived the war and was recovered by American forces at Göttingen in May 1945. After evaluation by American intelligence teams examining German testing procedures, the aircraft was eventually scrapped. Lloyd Hathcock's P-47D met a similar fate, recovered but not preserved. The pilot's fates after capture differed markedly. William Roach spent the remainder of the war at Stalag Luft in Barth, Germany. He was liberated by Soviet forces in May 1945 and returned to the United States. Lloyd Hathcock spent 11 months as a prisoner of war, primarily at Stalag Luft III, site of the famous Great Escape that had occurred just 3 months before his arrival. He was the only African-American pilot among thousands of white prisoners at the camp. When Soviet forces advanced westward in January 1945, German forces evacuated the camp, forcing prisoners on a brutal winter march. Hathcock was liberated by Allied forces in April 1945. He returned to the United States and played a significant role in the post-war desegregation of the U.S. Air Force. Hans-Werner Lerche survived the war despite flying 125 different aircraft types throughout the conflict. His remarkable safety record, never crashing or seriously damaging a single aircraft, stands as unique in aviation history. After the war, he provided extensive debriefings to Allied intelligence services about German aircraft development programs. His memoirs, published in 1977 in German and translated into English in 1980, provide one of the most detailed first-hand accounts of the German captured aircraft evaluation program. The broader lesson that emerges from a story of captured P-47 Thunderbolts in German hands transcends the specific technical details of one aircraft type. The Thunderbolt evaluation at Rechlin demonstrated that by 1943, the outcome of the air war over Europe was being determined not by pilot skill, tactical innovation, or even aircraft performance in narrow technical terms, but by industrial capacity applied at national scale. The nation that could design adequate equipment and produce it in overwhelming quantities while simultaneously producing everything else a modern military requires would inevitably defeat opponents who produced technically superior equipment in insufficient quantities. Germany's situation by late 1943 was that of a nation attempting to compete industrially against opponents whose combined industrial capacity exceeded German capacity by factors of 5 or more. When Britain refused to capitulate after France fell, when the Soviet Union survived the initial German onslaught and relocated its industry beyond German reach, and when the United States entered the war with its vast, untouched industrial base, Germany's path to military victory effectively closed. The only question was how long Germany could continue fighting and how much destruction would occur before the inevitable conclusion. The story of Beetle and the other captured Thunderbolts at Rechlin thus becomes a microcosm of Germany's broader strategic dilemma. German engineers could examine American equipment, understand American capabilities, accurately assess American industrial strength. This knowledge was professionally gathered, carefully analyzed, thoroughly documented. But knowledge alone could not produce the aluminum, steel, rubber, fuel, machine tools, skilled workers, undamaged factories, and functioning railroads required to compete with American industrial output. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, examined in minute detail by German engineers at Rechlin, proved a final truth about industrialized warfare in the 20th century. Material abundance, systematically applied through competent engineering and adequate tactical execution, would defeat technical excellence constrained by resource scarcity. The most powerful element in America's arsenal was not any individual technology, however impressive, but rather the complete industrial system that could conceive, design, develop, test, produce, and logistically support thousands of complex weapons systems simultaneously, while maintaining quality and continuously improving designs based on combat experience. The captured Thunderbolts taught this lesson with undeniable clarity. German engineers measured it precisely, documented it professionally, reported it accurately through their chain of command. The lesson arrived too late to matter. By the time William Roach's Beetle was being meticulously examined at Rechlin in late 1943, the outcome of the war was already determined by industrial mathematics that no amount of German engineering skill or pilot courage could overcome. The Thunderbolts sitting on German airfields, wearing hasty Bokenkreuz markings over American stars, represented a future that had already arrived, one in which industrial capacity had become the decisive factor in modern warfare.